Hi guys! Okay, it's time for the next PowerPoint video. So, first of all, well done everybody for doing the writing proposal and paragraph. I got most of those back, I think. You can change the topic later, although I would suggest sticking with the one that you chose. And I know that some of you were asking for more detailed feedback, but you have to understand that I'm teaching 150 students, so it's not always practical to respond to every single student in great detail. But as I wrote in the reply to most of you, when we develop our research papers later in the semester, you will write a draft copy. That means a rough practice copy of a 5-paragraph essay. And when you do that, I will certainly go through everybody's paper and I will give you as much of a detailed response as I think you require. And then after that, you will write the final paper. Okay, so please don't worry. I will be giving you detailed feedback on the writing a little bit later in the semester. Right, let's focus on this lesson. It's Unit 4 of our textbook. And what we will learn in Unit 4, Customs and Traditions Globally. That is the title. And then for the sort of writing techniques, we're going to talk about annotating texts, avoiding generalizations, and responding to an author's ideas. Okay. However, before we start this, what we should do first is to quickly review the synonyms that we did in Unit 3. Okay, so review of Unit 3 synonyms. This was page 70 and 71. If you remember, I asked you to do this, but you didn't have to send this to me. I just said, do it yourself. So hopefully you did it. And now you can open your books and let's just quickly go through the answers together. Okay, so synonyms, words which have the same or similar meanings. And what I've done actually, I've put the answers on a new slide. So let's go to the next slide. So the first part, you just had to choose a synonym which had a similar meaning to the word in bold. So number 1, we need a similar word. We require more public transport in the city, like a light rail network. Need and require are synonyms. Commuters try or commuters attempt to arrive on time, but traffic often causes delays. Try and attempt. Number 3, Masdar City uses solar energy to make or to produce its electricity. 4, it's important for people in industrial countries to lower or to reduce their use of energy. Traffic congestion causes people to use time and energy in an inefficient way. Right, this one you actually had to change the sentence slightly. In an inefficient way, but we're going to use wasteful, and so you probably know the rules. If we're using a word that begins with a vowel, A, E, I, O, U, like inefficient, then before it becomes an. But usually, when the word starts with a consonant, like wasteful does, W, then you're going to use a. So traffic congestion causes people to use time and energy in an inefficient way, or to use time and energy in a wasteful way. Number 6, we should think about, or we should consider, cycling instead of using our cars to travel short distances. Yeah, like they do in a lot of European countries, and I suppose in Asian countries too. Japan, for example, they're quite big with their cycling. Number 7, it will be difficult to get, or it will be difficult to convince drivers to use public transport. It's always important to look at the context. In this sentence, get is similar to convince. Right, next part then, part 4. In this one, you had to just rearrange the sentences a little bit to avoid repetition. So for this part, they were suggesting that we should use the word should, but you don't want to keep repeating the same word. So another option for using should is to replace it with it is important to, or it is a good idea. Okay, so this is on page 71, part 4. We should use bicycles to travel short distances, or you can rearrange that. Number 1, it is important to use bicycles to travel short distances. And number 2, using bicycles to travel short distances is a good idea. So it's just basically ways to avoid repeating yourself. This is very important in academic writing. You don't want to repeat the same words or the same phrases. Okay, so we're building up some techniques, such as synonyms, to avoid that. Okay, now the next one was, we should build more high-speed railways between cities. Again, it is important to build more high-speed railways between cities, or building more high-speed railways between cities is a good idea. And then 5 and 6, same grammar. We should consider new ways of reducing traffic congestion. So just look at number 2, number 4, number 6. As it says in your book, if you're going to use the phrase a good idea, then you're going to use the gerund. That's when you add ing to a verb and you make it into a noun. So use becomes using, build becomes building, consider becomes considering. That is when you start the sentence with a verb, we change it into a noun. It's called a gerund. Okay, and then quickly, let's just wrap this up. Part 5. This is where you had to use it is a good idea, it is important, or we should. So number 1, there are a number of reasons why we should use public transport instead of driving. Number 2, another reason why using public transport is a good idea is that it reduces the amount of pollution from cars. Number 3, it seems to me that we should encourage people to use cycle lanes more by building more and making them safer. Number 4, we're starting the sentence. It is important for people of all ages to be able to use public transport. Number 5, I'm not entirely convinced that we should use public transport for all local journeys instead of driving. Now, you could say, I'm not entirely convinced that it is a good idea, but then you would have to say that it is a good idea to use public transport. We don't have to there. So number 5 is we should. And then number 6, some people doubt whether spending money to build an underground railway system is a good idea. Okay, so I hope that you did those exercises, and I hope that you checked your answers, and hopefully you got them all correct. Right, now we will start Unit 4. So Unit 4, Customs and Traditions, page 80 to 101. Okay, I'm just opening my book as well as we go through this. Customs and Traditions. Right, so let's start with one of the reading articles. Reading and vocabulary on page 84. Now, as you've noticed, this book has a lot of information. We can't possibly study it all. So we're just picking and choosing the parts that we think are most useful to you in your first semester as we try to develop some skills for academic writing. So we're going to start with the reading and vocabulary. Right, so page 84, let's just start with some vocabulary. Preparing to read. So we're going to read an article about customs and traditions in different countries. Before we read the article, we just want to check that we understand some of the vocab. Okay, so appearance, culture, exchange, expect, formal, greet, relationship. Right, so let's just go through it together. Number 1, I love travelling because I enjoy experiencing other cultures. Make sure you use the correct form of the word. We've got to add an S because it is plural. Okay, I love travelling because I enjoy experiencing other cultures and their food, celebrations, and traditions. Number 2, in Japan, it is customary for business people to exchange business cards when they meet for the first time. Right, similar in Korea, isn't it? People exchange business cards. Number 3, in Korea and some Spanish-speaking countries, people do not expect a woman to change her last name when she gets married. Yeah, in Western countries, we traditionally, the female will change her surname when she gets married. But not so much in Korea and some Spanish-speaking countries. Number 4, in Thailand, people greet each other by holding their hands together, bowing and saying sawadee, which is similar to hello or good day in English. Number 5, many languages have 2 ways to say you. They have a formal word to use in polite situations like work, and a different word for family and friends. Number 6, I always spend a lot of time on my hair and clothes before a special occasion. I want to make sure my appearance is perfect. And the last one, in most cultures, people who have a close family relationship enjoy spending time together and giving each other gifts. Okay, so we've just kind of gone through that quite quickly, but that's not really the main thing that we want to study in this unit, so let's just get it out of the way. Okay, next slide. Right, so annotating a text, page 85, and then the article is on page 86. Annotating a text. So while you are reading, now actually I know that a lot of students already are very used to doing this, and it's something that you learn as a high school student or maybe even before then. So I'm guessing that this is probably just something that you already know, but let's go through it. Annotating a text. Active readers often annotate, which means make notes, while they are reading. There are many ways to do this. You should try different techniques and choose the ones which work best for you. But, they have some suggestions. Highlighting the main ideas in a bright colour or put brackets around them. Highlight keywords and phrases in a different colour. Use the same colours in all of your annotations. Underline, circle, or box important details. Yeah, that's what I used to do. I wasn't quite as high-tech as some people with their many different coloured highlighter pens. I would just underline the keywords or the key phrases, such as examples, reasons, and supporting arguments. And in the margin, you can write some details. Okay, so this is all about annotating as you read. And if you look at page 86, you can see there that they've given you examples of this. So paragraph 1, by the way, it's Customs Around the World by Andy Schmidt. So paragraph 1, you can see there he's underlined, whoever is studying this, they've underlined some text. There's highlighting, circling, and then in paragraph 2, where it talks about Brazil, you can see there are some notes on the left. So this is just about giving you some ideas about how to annotate a text as you read. But like I say, I know that a lot of you do this already. Right guys, what you should do now is read this article, because we're going to refer to it throughout the rest of this lesson. So please just take a few moments to read this article, and you can continue annotating sort of, after the Japan and the Saudi Arabia sections. You can annotate and practice doing that. Okay, so when you have finished reading this article, and take your time, go slow, you can move to the next slide. Right, so now we're going to talk about some techniques to help you with your writing. The first one is avoiding generalizations. This is on page 92. And this is very important. This is going to help your writing become more professional. Okay, now these are things that native speakers also learn to do. Avoiding generalizations. What is a generalization? That's when we make a big sweeping comment. For example, I could say, all Koreans eat kimchi every day. Obviously, that is not true. That is what we call a generalization. It is too general. So generalizations are not mature writing because they're usually not accurate and they're not true. So we want to avoid generalizations. Okay, let's have a look at this box. In academic English, be careful not to make generalizations unless you have details to support them. For instance, a reader of the example sentence below could argue that not all cultural traditions change. Right, so look at the example. All cultural traditions change. Now, that is a generalization. So, they're going to give you some tips here. You can avoid generalizations by using words such as many, can, or tend to. So, many is a quantifier. Many cultural traditions change. Notice there that many comes before the noun. Many cultural traditions. Okay, that is the noun. Verb, tend to. Cultural traditions tend to change. So tend to comes before the adjective or the verb. Tend to change. Tend to usually happens. And then modal verb, cultural traditions can change. Right, so those are just some very simple techniques to avoid generalizations. Right, let's quickly practice. Look at the questions there. Read the generalizations about common customs and then use the words in brackets to make the sentences more accurate. Right, stop the video quickly, everybody, and just have a go at doing those 5 questions. Okay, I'm assuming that you have had a go at doing them. Now I'm going to straight away give you the answers. So, number 1, we tend to tip the waiter in restaurants. Tend to comes before the verb, we tend to tip the waiter in restaurants. Although not so much in England. Sometimes, but it's not super common. But in America and Canada, it's very, very normal, isn't it? We tend to tip the waiter in restaurants. Right, number 2. Brazilian culture is informal. Generalization. Brazilian culture tends to be informal. Okay. So that would be a more professional way of describing a culture. Number 3, expensive gifts look suspicious. Expensive gifts can look suspicious. Okay. Number 4, common hand gestures like waving can be misunderstood in a different culture. And then number 5, in the Middle East, old people live with their children. In the Middle East, many old people live with their children. Okay, so this is your first technique to avoid generalizations. Okay, so please try to avoid doing this in your writing, and obviously later, whenever we have some writing assignments, I will be checking to see if you avoid generalizations. This is the first technique. Now there's also another technique. Let's look at the next slide. Adverbs of frequency. This is page 93. So this is another way to avoid generalizations. You can use adverbs of frequency. Okay, so look at the chart there, or the table. You start at 0%, which is never, and 100% is always. And then in the middle, you've got those adverbs: seldom, hardly ever, rarely, occasionally, sometimes, often, usually, almost always, normally, and frequently. Okay, and then just look at the grammar there. Adverbs go before the main verb, but after the verb to be in a sentence. Example: in Tokyo, people usually go to work by train or bus. Okay, so that's another way to avoid generalizations. And then the next example: formal dinner parties are often difficult to organize. Okay, so again, we are going to practice using the questions. Number 2, read the generalizations and use the adverbs in brackets to make the sentences more accurate. Okay, so once again, stop the video please and have a quick go at filling in those questions. Okay, and I will now go through them again, assuming that you have taken the time to fill in the missing parts. So, number 1, Brazilian men usually shake hands, though it is not unusual for men to kiss each other on the cheek. Number 2, the generalization: Saudi men wear traditional clothing. Saudi men often wear traditional clothing. Number 3, professionals get upset if you don't use the correct title. Professionals sometimes get upset. Number 4, cultural knowledge is helpful in business situations. Cultural knowledge is frequently helpful. And number 5, in Japan you should arrive on time. In Japan you should always arrive on time. Yes, right, so this is an example where you can use the 100% adverb always if you are 100% sure that it is correct. Okay, right, so we've learned 2 ways to avoid generalizations. We did the tend to, many, and can, and then this one is the adverbs of frequency. Okay, and we will be practicing these in a homework assignment, which I will explain a little bit later in this video. Let's keep going because we've got some more stuff to study in Unit 4. This is a longer video, everybody, because there's a lot to get through in this unit. Next slide. Right, there's also synonyms to avoid repetition, and this is at the bottom of page 93. We might as well quickly go through it. So, number 1, the business meeting was short and we went straight to the reception for our overseas visitors. Right, so look in the box there. Which word is similar to short? Which one is it? Brief. Okay, so the business meeting was brief. The business meeting was short. Number 2, the high cost of education is a bad problem for many families. Okay, what do you think? The high cost of education is a bad problem? What would be a similar word to bad? Serious. Serious problem. In number 3, in many cultures, parents and their married children live in a different house or live in different houses. So, in this context, another word for different would be separate. Separate houses. In number 4, in some countries, cooking traditional food is becoming less popular. In some countries, certain countries. Now, the meaning of certain here is not, I'm 100% sure, I'm certain. It means, like the sentence, it means in some countries, in certain cases, in certain countries. Number 5, there were several powerful people at the event. Powerful people, important. Number 6, some customs and traditions are not clear to people who are visiting a country for the first time. Not clear to people, not obvious. Number 7, it is usual for people in my country to have large families. Usual, common. Okay. So actually we have 3 techniques to avoid generalizations or to avoid repetition. Adverbs of frequency, synonyms, and then the words that we looked at on page 92. Tend to, many, and can. Okay, right, we're moving on to the next part then. Responding to an author's ideas. Now this is also very important, and especially when you start to write your research paper a little bit later, because you're going to have to use research. You've got to use other people's evidence, examples, and you have to quote it. That is the whole point of a research paper. That's the whole point of an academic paper. So how do you respond to authors' ideas? It's not always easy. So let's start looking at this. This is on page 95. Responding to an author's ideas. One way of responding to a text you have read is to address the author's main ideas with your own point of view. How you respond will depend on how you feel about each point. But here are some common ways people respond to an author's ideas. Right, so we've got 5 different techniques here. And for each one, I'm going to give you an example. So the first one is agreeing or disagreeing with the author's points or ideas. Right, so here's an example of that. Despite Schmidt's detailed research, I disagree with his views on blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter what the next part is. So Schmidt, remember, he wrote the article that we have read in this unit about different countries' cultures. So this would be a way of disagreeing. Despite Schmidt's detailed research, I disagree with his views on, or if you want to agree, just like Schmidt wrote in his article, I agree that, blah, blah, blah. So agreeing or disagreeing. Next one, giving an example from your own experience or of someone you know. So here's an example. Schmidt talks about Japanese being formal. And this reminds me of my experience in Korea, when meeting new people for the first time, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is how you can give an example from your own experience. And this reminds me of my experience in Korea. Now, obviously, there are many different ways to express this. I'm just giving you one example here. The third one, connecting the author's ideas to something you read or heard from another source. Schmidt's description of formal Japanese culture reminds me of the Murakami novel Norwegian Wood and the scene where blah blah blah. Reminds me. Connecting the author's ideas to something else. Next one, providing a different opinion about the same issue. Schmidt says that Brazilian culture is generally informal. However, in my experience of working in a Brazilian office, the staff actually acted in a very formal way. Right, so this is an example where you can provide a different opinion on the same issue. And in this example, it's my experience, but you could compare one writer with another writer. In fact, that is very common in academic papers as well. And then the last one, evaluating the point or idea, for example, saying whether you think that it is positive or negative. Schmidt's article is very positive as it helps to show people how important culture is and how learning about it before travelling can have a significant impact on the quality of the experience. So evaluating. Okay, so one more time. Ways that you can respond to other writers' ideas. You can agree or disagree. You can give an example from your own experience. You can connect the author's ideas to some other thing that you read or heard. You can provide a different opinion about the same issue. And you can evaluate to say whether you think it is positive or negative. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Now in your book, it also talks about paraphrasing. This is on page 95 also. Paraphrasing is another way that you can use other writers' words. So let's just read this. Paraphrasing means rewriting someone else's ideas in your own words. Right, now you have to be very careful here. This skill is important, especially when writing essays, because copying another person's exact words without referring to the source is plagiarism. Plagiarism means stealing someone's ideas. Plagiarism is a very, very, very serious offence at university, okay? It can cause students to get kicked out. It can cause papers to be given a fail. Plagiarism is unacceptable. You are not allowed to steal other writers' words without acknowledging them. Okay, so this is a technique that every student in every country has to learn. So, to paraphrase, begin by reading the original text. Here's an example. International travel has many benefits, but visitors can run into trouble if they don't know some basic rules about the cultures they are visiting. That's from the Schmidt article. So there is the quote, Schmidt, 2018. Okay, that is how you can tell us where it is from. Right, then use one or more of the following strategies to paraphrase the original. Remember to include the source of your information even when you are paraphrasing. So here are some ideas, here are some techniques. Replace words or phrases with synonyms. So, foreign travel has many advantages, but travellers can have problems unless they spend time learning the customs of the places they are visiting. So this is taking Schmidt's idea, but we're just replacing some of the words with synonyms. So benefits has become advantages. Run into trouble becomes problems. Okay, but it's still basically Schmidt's idea. So we still have to write Schmidt 2018 at the end in parentheses. Okay, another technique. Change the order of some words or phrases. Foreign travel has many advantages, But unless travellers learn about the customs of the places they are visiting, they can have problems. Again, this is Schmidt's idea, so we have to quote him at the end in parentheses. And all we have done is change the order of the words. Okay, so this is obviously a way that you can add examples and evidence to your research papers. The last one is to use indirect speech. According to Schmidt, 2018, foreign travel has many advantages. Or you can say what they wrote, and you can say Schmidt states, Schmidt believes, Schmidt says. Schmidt states that foreign travel has many advantages. Okay, so those are 3 techniques for paraphrasing, and you should definitely practice this, and this is what you're going to have to do later when we do our research papers. Okay, let's keep going. Right, this video is long, so bear with me, but the next part is writing a summary and a personal response, page 97. So this is where you can practice what we've just studied. So, writing a summary and a personal response. This is an opportunity to evaluate and express opinions about a writer's ideas. Excuse me. A summary is a short paragraph which paraphrases the main ideas and important points of a longer text. You should always write a summary in your own words, but be sure not to change the original author's ideas. The paragraph should not include your opinion. So a summary is summarizing the author's ideas, okay? The last part there is very important. It is not your opinion. The summary is not your opinion. The response is where you give your ideas about the points in the summary. Your response can include examples from your personal experience, facts, or knowledge from other sources. You can use the following expressions. I agree or disagree with the author. I think that, in my experience, in my opinion. Okay, so a summary and a personal response. Summarize a writer's ideas and then give your opinion. Right, so we're going to practice this in the homework assignment. But your book gives us an example on page 97. So this is an example for the Schmidt article, a summary and response. So it's 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph is the summary. The second paragraph is the response. Let's have a quick look. So the first paragraph, the summary. In the article, Customs Around the World, Schmidt, 2018, says it is important for travellers to learn about the customs of other countries in order to prevent cultural misunderstandings in the places they are visiting. Schmidt focuses on 3 countries, Brazil, Japan, and Saudi Arabia, and describes some customs visitors should know about. According to the author, Brazilians are informal people. They touch a lot, and punctuality is not expected on most occasions. Japanese culture is exactly the opposite. People don't touch in public, and there are rules for how to exchange business cards, how to dress, what kind of gifts to give, and when to arrive at a meeting or someone's home. Saudi culture is also formal. For example, women and men are not allowed to touch each other in public. The author stresses the importance of personal relationships and warns us that it is important to spend time asking about a host's family or health before starting to talk about business matters. Right, so there is nothing there about the writer's opinion. It is just summarizing the article. Now, the second paragraph is the response. I definitely agree with Schmidt's main point. It is easy to make a mistake if you don't know about other people's customs. To give an example from my own experience, I was travelling in India when I was invited to dinner at a friend's home. I had never been to an Indian home, so I decided to do some reading about a proper gift to bring. One of the things I learned is that a guest should not bring white flowers because white is associated with death. Reading this information before the event prevented me from making an embarrassing mistake. In short, these examples remind us that travelers must study the customs of a new country before visiting it. Okay, so that is the summary and response to another author's article. And this is what we're going to practice. Okay, so next. Your task. Homework for Unit 4. It's 3 parts, and you have to complete all the parts, 1, 2, and 3. And I'm setting you a deadline of April 16th. That is 1 week later. And here's a little screenshot of what the homework assignment looks like. So part 1, you have to write 6 sentences using tend to, many, and can to show you can avoid making generalizations. And you should copy my example style. So all Indians eat using their hands. That is a generalization. It is not professional. The better way to do it would be many Indians eat using their hands. Okay, so please give me 6 examples, 2 for tend to, 2 for many, and 2 for can, and give me the incorrect sentence and then the correct sentence. Just like my example, please. Part 2 is very similar, but this time you're going to use the adverbs of frequency to show that you can avoid making generalizations. Okay, you can use any of the adverbs. Seldom, rarely, occasionally, sometimes, often, usually. I don't need to read them all, but they're there. Remember, you are not writing about yourself. You're writing about facts or information about the world. So this time, you can just write 1 correct sentence. Look at my example. British people often eat roast meat meals on Sundays. We call that a Sunday roast. Okay, now the generalization would be British people eat roast meals on Sundays. But the better way would be to use the adverb often. Okay, so part 1, part 2, you're just practicing using writing sentences, avoiding generalizations. Part 3 is where you're going to do the summary and response. So you have to write a summary and response to an article. You must find an article from the internet, and you have to copy and paste it and send it to me so I can see it. And then you have to write your summary and response. Now please use page 97 as your guide. You have to write 2 paragraphs, a summary and a response. Now, please write a similar amount of words as page 97. Don't make it too short, but don't make it too long, everybody. This is just practice. You don't have to write pages and pages. Okay? So those are your 3 homework tasks, and please send them to me by April 16th. And remember, it's the same rule for every assignment. In the email, make sure you put your class day and time. Okay, right, thanks for your attention, everyone. That was a long lesson. And just finally, I would like to say that you probably know that we have extended the online classes pretty much throughout the whole of this semester. Now, I know a lot of you are disappointed about this, but I think we can all agree that it is probably the sensible thing to do while we all try to get over this coronavirus problem. And I think that we all need to still maintain social distancing, and going back to the classroom, it wouldn't be a good idea, even though we all would like to do that. But hopefully before the end of the semester, maybe at the end of the week 15, week 16, we might be able to all get together. So let's just keep going like this for now, everybody. Right, I'm going to wrap up this video, so see you next time.